welcome. Here we go. It's that time again. Happy Monday. Matt Connarton Unleashed, and we are live from the studios of WMNH 95.3 FM in glorious downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. Also on Comcast 97 if you're in Manchester, streaming at WMNHradio.org, and on the Facebook on the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page. Please give that a like if you haven't done so already. And, of course, you can go to my website, mattconnerton.com, for all of your live streaming options, social media links, contact info, show archives, etc., etc. Hello to our friends at Raw Talk Online. I see Charles Richardson in the chat room. Hello. And, of course, today is Monday, July 12th. That's a difficult combination of consonants, my friends, for me anyway. 2021, July 12th. And I should just cheat and say 12. Be easier. No one would probably even notice here on this Monday afternoon. Welcome, everybody. And, of course, it is it's very humid out if you're in Manchester, New Hampshire. Very humid. A little cooler, but humid. But very exciting week we have planned, because on Wednesday of this week, which will be Wednesday, July 14th, which is much, much easier for me to say, we will be doing our first ever live remote on this program since being here at WMNH, and the first live remote of WMNH in the post-pandemic era, although I'm a little uncomfortable calling it post-pandemic, because in some parts of the country, the pandemic is raging, and ICUs are full, etc. But, we've done extraordinarily well in this part of the country, that's for sure. So I guess we'll say post-pandemic here in New Hampshire, of course. But we will be doing a live remote. We will be live from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Hop Knot in the Brady Sullivan at 1000 Elm Street. So very excited about that. The weather being what it is forecasted, we will likely be indoors, is what it sounds like. I heard Peter on the replay, of course, Peter White from the morning show with Peter White. He'll be there as well. I think Peter is... he's welcome to join me. I don't know who else is going to be there. I'm keeping it loose. I haven't invited any specific guests. I've just kind of cast a wide net and says, whoever wants to come down and say hello, please do so. But I know Peter White is planning to be there, and I hope he jumps on a mic with me, because I always enjoy that. But, of course, for those of you who don't know, Peter is not only the morning show host here at WMNH, but he's also the program director. So I know he'll be there, and I assume... I don't know if the plan is we're going to be there, and our friend Joe Lar, who works here, if he'll be back here in the studio. I've never done a live remote here at WMNH, so I don't know all the intricacies of how this works, but I'm very, very excited. So Peter, of course, has done many of them. The morning show over the years, pre-pandemic, was doing live remotes on occasion, and always very, very cool. And, but, Peter said that he wanted the first one, because I hadn't done one yet. He really wanted the first one of the post-pandemic era to be mine. So, I'm very honored by that and very excited. So if you're in the area, and even if you're not in the area, trust me, it's worth the drive or the plane trip. Maybe you want to fly in from wherever you are. Please come say hello. Enjoy some delicious pretzels, some craft beer, etc. It is such a wonderful place, and a wonderful family that owns and operates it too, which is one of the many great things about having that partnership and having them as a sponsor. So, but come say hello on Wednesday. We will be live from the Hop Knot in the Brady Sullivan. It's convenient too for us because it's right across the street. So. Which is wonderful. But come on down, say hello, have some food, have some beverage, maybe get on the microphone. I don't know how many mics we'll have. Like I said, I've never done this, so this will be a lot of fun. So that is coming up this Wednesday. And by the way, I always say too, when I mention the Hop Knot, because it is Monday, don't go there today, because Monday and Tuesday is their weekend. But they will be open. They're open Wednesday through Sunday. Hope to see you on Wednesday. And Peter White, he'll be there too. So if you want to come say hello to Peter, there's that opportunity as well. And we'll see who else shows up. I've heard from some people who are planning to come by. So we're really excited about that. And Peter should be very excited too, because Jenny, I had to hide it, because if I'm staring at it, I'll be tempted to eat it. But Jenny made some bread that I brought in for Peter that I will leave here, so he'll have it in the morning. But the bread is very, very good. Let's see. Let me give the numbers, and then we'll say hello to everybody in the Facebook live chat. But if you'd like to join us today on the program, the number to call is 603-250-6007. That is 603-250-6007. You can also text me at 617-917-4476. Tweet me at Matt Connarton, or send an email to matt@mattconnerton.com. And, of course, you can always interact and opine in the Facebook live chat. But the best thing to do so that we can hear and enjoy your dulcet tones is to give us a call at 603-250-6007. We have much to discuss today, of course. It's the news cycle is such. There's always plenty to talk about, but we can talk about whatever you like if you happen to call us. Let's say hello to everybody in the Facebook live chat. Mike Pelopita joins us in the chat room. Mike, of course, from Queen City Cabinetry. You can bring your kitchen to life with Queen City Cabinetry in the historic Sunbeam Mall. Another one of our wonderful sponsors here at WMNH and big supporters of all the shows here at the station. Wayne Noel is a top fan all the way from Michigan and says, afternoon, Matt and everyone, as you show up. Wayne, feel free. It's worth the drive. I should come out on Wednesday. Come to the Hop Knot. How long of a drive is that? I've never driven to Michigan specifically. I have driven to Illinois. Because I have family that used to live in the Chicago area, and I drove it a couple of times, and I feel like it was about 15, 16 hours, something like that. Miriam Banish, it was a long time ago. Miriam Banish is in the chat room. Miriam's a top fan, says good afternoon. Dirk Don of Arrogant Media joins us in the chat. Dirk, by the way, congratulations on Arrogant Media reaching 600 subscribers on the YouTube. Very, very cool. We have our first call of the week on the show. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's this?
Hey, Matt. It's Ron. How you doing, pal?
Good, Ron. How are you doing?
Good, good. Hey, listen, Jenny just texted me. She tried to get in touch with you, and she couldn't. She said it's okay for you to eat some of that bread if you wanted to. Don't worry about it. She'd be glad to make another one. So they just wanted to relay the message.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, when I take a break at the top of the hour, I might just shove that whole loaf into my face. Swallow it right down.
There you go, pal.
And then if I get in trouble, I'll just say, Ron said, you said it was fine.
See that? You got all your bases covered.
Yes. Although, I don't know, Ron, you sound a little too enthusiastic about relaying this message. I think you might be up to something. And by the way, how well do I really know you? I don't think we've ever even met. Can I try? Is this even really Ron? For all I know,
yeah, you can trust me. I'll meet you Wednesday.
This could be, you could actually,
well, actually
be.
Maybe I might, after this phone call, maybe I won't be able to meet you Wednesday. You might punch me in the nose or something.
I don't know. You could be, how do I know you're not Ron's evil twin? Nor. I mean, I don't know.
Well, all right, I'll tell you what. If you're not comfortable with cutting a piece of it, just lick it.
Oh, that sounds like a conversation for the other show, Ron. But no, I think I'm going to, it's in a nice sealed bag. I think I'm going to leave it alone. I already sent Peter White a picture of the bread, so I know he's going to be very excited for the bread. So I don't want to deprive him of that.
Peter, so he got done texting me right after Jenny, and he said, "Oh, I don't care if Matt has a piece. He can have a big piece." Did
he now?
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever you say, Nor. I'm not falling for this.
All right, brother. I don't want to interrupt your show anymore. I just wanted to have some fun.
All right, Ron. No, I appreciate it. Thank you for the call.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Don't think I didn't hear that mischievous laugh trying to get me in trouble. Do you know how much trouble I'd be in? A heap. You hear people say that, a heap of trouble. Actually, I think that's something they say. I don't think they say it around here. I think that's something they say in other parts of the country. Maybe in the Old West. I'm in a heap of trouble. I don't know. I'm all over the place. I'm sorry. You know why I'm thinking about expressions like that? I happened to, I was on the YouTube, and I honestly don't know why, but I stumbled upon a random clip of the television show Lonesome Dove. most people, when they think of Lonesome Dove, they think of the miniseries. That's if you're even, I mean, geez, if you're even like 5 minutes younger than I am, you probably don't even remember any of this. But there was a very popular miniseries. I think it was based on the book Lonesome Dove. I think that was back in the 80s. And then in the 90s, there was a syndicated television show called Lonesome Dove. It actually starred, one of the people in it was Eric McCormick, who went on to be Will on Will and Grace, the very popular sitcom. Anyway, I used to watch Lonesome Dove back in the 90s. And I wasn't even really that into Westerns, but for whatever reason, I would watch Lonesome Dove. And I think one of the characters talked about being, I'm in a heap of trouble. Yeah, anyway. Boy, it's hot in here. It's very, very humid. It's a humid day. Let's see. Charles Richardson is in the chat room. I did mention earlier, of course, Charles from Raw Talk Online and the Charles Richardson Show, which is live every Wednesday and Friday night from 7 to 9 p.m. online. Charles says, hey there, OSIM, everyone. And almost as though, I wonder if Charles is psychic or if he and I are communicating telepathically without realizing it. Because I saw that comment and I was like, OSIM? I don't even know what that is. That must be one of the, the young people. They come up with all these acronyms for everything. And then and then as soon as that thought went through my mind, the very next thing, Charles clarified what OSIM is. It's O blank, it's Monday. I can't say that word, what the S is, because it's, it's FM radio. That's a naughty word, but that's what it is, OSIM. I learned something. Miriam Banish, this is regarding Wednesday, the live remote at the Hop Knot. I might pop in. I have to take Scout to a vet in Massachusetts, but maybe I'll get back in time. Very good. Dan Lavasser is in the chat room and says hi. Wayne says, regarding the drive, depends if you can cut through Canada or not. I don't think we're able to. Yeah, actually, Wayne, you're right, because I remember one of the times that I drove to Illinois when my family was still living in Illinois, or maybe they were already in Wisconsin at this point because my mother moved to Wisconsin. But I remember we went through Canada. I don't remember if it was to save time or if it was just a scenic route. It was a long time ago. But I don't think currently we're allowed to cross the border, correct? I don't think that's changed. There's some comments regarding the bread I'm not going to read just because, again, that's for the other show. That's for Matt Connarton Unsheathed. Tom Blanchard joins us in the chat room. And also our old friend, Chris Rose. Hello, Chris. Nice to see you in there. The number to call again, 603-250-6007. If you'd like to join us, 603-250-6007. You can also text me at 617-917-4476. Tweet me at Matt Connarton or send an email to matt@mattconnerton.com. By the way, Texas Mike just joined us in the Facebook live chat. Hello, Texas Mike. I wanted to get into a little bit. I know there's a whole bunch of things, and I do later in the show. We'll talk about CPAC. I thought CPAC was an annual event. I guess it's, what is it, every 6 months? Is it twice a year? Apparently for this one, they didn't have a giant golden statue of Trump, at least. But we might save that for later in the show. I wanted to tackle this quickly because I'm concerned that this is an underreported story, and I'm just upset. This is from Reason.com. Denied American visas, these Afghans were forced to make a perilous escape after helping U.S. troops for years. Unable to tap into the immigration pathway for Afghan helpers, these men and their families opted to flee elsewhere. And before we get into the heart of the story, and, we won't spend a ton of time on this because it's not a very long story, but, and this has been, aspects of this have been covered in the mainstream media. I know this, some people who will tell you, the liberal media, they don't want to say anything negative about the Biden administration, but I have seen some coverage of this and some other negative stories. And if you're a longtime listener of the show, you may or may not realize this about me, but my attitude is, I'm going to call him like I see him. It doesn't matter who I voted for ultimately. or who I supported, anything negative that I see, I'm going to call it out. And if anything, if I voted for someone, if I publicly supported someone, I feel more of an obligation to call out negative things that I see. And I have to read this comment. This can't wait. Joe Friday said, I thought CPAC was the thing you wore to bed when you were having breathing issues. Just saying. That's very clever. It's, a CPAP is the anyway, if you snore and, sleep apnea, which is very dangerous. I think I've actually stopped breathing in my sleep only because I had a nightmare once that I couldn't breathe. And then I woke up and I realized I'd stopped breathing. That was a long time ago. But I have been very concerned. Now, the Biden administration, of course, pulling us out of Afghanistan, which is an ongoing process, although I think the bulk of our troops are out now. But, or I know Bagram or Bagram, I'm not sure which is the correct way to say it, Air Force Base, we've left. And, of course, we leave behind some equipment because we always leave behind some equipment. In fact, if you go back to when the United States first went into Afghanistan as part of our response to 9/11, what did American troops find as soon as they landed there? A lot of abandoned Russian, Soviet equipment that was left behind from when the Soviet Union occupied Afghanistan. And that's why you would hear people notice that and observe, oh, that's right, Afghanistan, this is where great empires go to die. And now we're here. Great. Now, I think that us leaving is great. And I agree with the Biden administration to follow through on the progress on the promise that, President Trump had made and didn't get it done, that President Obama had made and didn't get it done. The Biden administration is following through on that and getting us out, which I think is a good thing. However, there have been some problems reported. And again, the so-called liberal media has been reporting on this. It's not just Fox and then these other things that I don't even consider real media, like OANN or whatever it is, and this Newsmax. They're just propaganda networks for the right wing. Not that Fox isn't, but you understand what I'm saying. But I have seen coverage of this. And I'm getting concerned that this whole thing has been rushed and has been done clumsily and has put lives at risk unnecessarily. And I'm reminded of, in kind but not degree, to use an expression that I often hear John Hopwood use, but I'm reminded a little bit of when Trump made the decision to pull us out of Syria. Now, when Trump announced that, I think via a tweet initially, because that's how he did things, I agreed with the decision. I wanted us out of Syria. But when people, and yes, I am thinking of a certain individual who would call the show and say, well, look, Trump's getting us out of Syria. Isn't this great? I said, yes, I agree with the decision. It's a great idea to get out of Syria. However, you can have the greatest idea. You can have the greatest idea in the world, the greatest idea anyone's ever had. But if you take that idea and you execute that idea in the clumsiest, dumbest, most ham-fisted way possible, then all of a sudden that great idea doesn't seem so great because you've blown the execution of it, And that's what happened in Syria, in my view. Trump said, okay, we're getting out of Syria. Okay, great. But then they proceeded to go about it in such a clumsy way. I mean, Trump may as well have personally called up Vladimir Putin in Russia and personally called up Erdogan in Turkey and said, hey, just so you know, we've decided to go ahead and create this huge power vacuum. Feel free to fill it, because we're getting out. So have at it, do what you want. And it resulted in a lot of unnecessary death there while we were on our way out the door, heading for the exits. So the point being, if we're going to get out of places that we shouldn't be, I'm all for it. That's a great decision. But you have to do it the right way. And when it's not being done the right way, we have to hold these people accountable. And just like, I said, Well, we have to hold Trump accountable for this. He had a great idea, but what is this mess? Because if you remember, it was like, he makes the announcement and then we start to leave and it's like, is this how we're doing it? This is nuts. Oh, and by the way, then it turned out, too, we weren't bringing any of those troops home from Syria, by the way, just to remind everyone. They were being repurposed, if you will, to help the Saudis with their genocide in Yemen. So, no, Trump doesn't get any credit for that from me. But that takes us down a side street we don't need to go down right now. But if the Biden administration isn't getting this right, then they need to be called out on it. And I'm really getting a sense that I don't know what's going on here, but it may be that the entire thing is happening too fast. But there's been stories over the past week or so about translators who have been very helpful to the United States, who should have been, they should have been invited on a plane. Hey, you've been helping us all these years. This war has gone on for 20 years. Some of these translators have been around for a hell of a long time and have been of use to the United States and have been very helpful. And they're worried they're going to be grabbed and killed. And somehow, because of what? Paperwork? We're not just putting them on a plane and getting them here and figuring it out. And then, we can figure out the particulars later, but let's at least get them to safety first. Why isn't that happening? Why isn't that happening? So I'm upset because these are all things, the president, and again, I don't want to go down that side street about executive orders. I don't like to complain about executive orders too much because it's a completely partisan rap anyway, right? Republicans are only mad when a Democrat is president signing executive orders. When it's their own guy, they have no problem with it. And the same thing with Democrats. They're only mad when there's a Republican president signing executive orders. When it's their own guy, they have no problem with it. So, nothing shows the hypocrisy of partisanship and ideology as much as that issue of executive orders. However, I will just say this. So the president has been signing executive orders. He can't sign an executive order that anyone who's been helpful to us, who's been on our side in some way, or maybe even a neutral party, but who has been helpful to us, like these translators, we can't, I don't know, make up some, you can do whatever you want with an executive order, make up some special status for these people that say we have to bring them out and make sure they're safe. Give them citizenship. I don't care. They've been helpful to the U.S. Make them citizens, whatever. Who's going to argue with? Well, immigration hardliners will argue with it because they'll argue with absolutely anything that you try to do for absolutely anyone who wasn't born on American soil. But for the most part, how could you really argue, right? Are people going to argue in large numbers? No. So, let's not just leave people in the cold. You know what else it reminds me of? I mean, if you want to go back even, well, of course, there's a million of examples of this through history, right? But all of a sudden, I'm just reminded of when it was the Kurds, right? When we went into Iraq, when we kicked, going back to George H.W. Bush 41, when we Saddam Hussein kicked the Iraqis out of Kuwait. And then, the Kurds, the Kurdish rebels in northern Iraq, we told them, the Bush administration told them, we'll have your back, we'll help you. We want you to have a shot at being autonomous and independent from the rest of Iraq, so you'll have nothing to fear from Saddam, and that way you can continue to self-govern and do your own thing. And then when they started getting slaughtered, we just said, oh, yeah, well, good luck, guys. I'm just saying, historically, the United States does have a pattern of leaving people out in the cold who, maybe we should have helped. So there is a familiar story here. I just wish it didn't have to continue into perpetuity, but apparently it does. So let me get to the story here. So, again, this is from Reason.com. August 31 will mark the end of U.S. involvement in the war in Afghanistan, President Joe Biden announced today. That departure will also include thousands of Afghans who have helped the U.S. military over the years as interpreters, as engineers, and in other critical roles. Biden said, quote, "There is a home for you in the United States if you so choose. We will stand with you just as you stood with us," unquote. Now, those are very nice words, but are they only words? The president's announcement puts a long-awaited exclamation point on the conversation about the fate of those Afghan helpers. The immigration pathway established to serve Afghans who assisted American forces is called the Special Immigrant Visa, SIV. It's intensive 14... See, this is where I get annoyed. Its intensive 14-step application, its strict qualification requirements, and human errors during processing have kept many long-serving Afghans from taking advantage of the opportunity supposedly afforded to them in return for, quote, "faithful and valuable service to the U.S. government," unquote. Okay. My impulse when I read that is to say, and I think I did say it a moment ago, and maybe I want to retract and rephrase it slightly, but my impulse is to say, screw all that. Just give them citizenship. They've been helping us over there. They've been risking their lives. Let's get them here. Let's get them safe. Let's take care of them. Give them citizenship. Now, there is an obvious counterpoint to that, which I recognize, and that is, well, Matt, you do want to be a little bit careful because you don't want to accidentally give someone citizenship, and then we find out this whole time they've been playing us, and they're actually a terrorist, and they're going to blow up the United States or whatever. Okay, understood. But clearly this process needs to be drastically streamlined, which is not an easy thing for government to do. I know. Remember, I'm a, I know y'all think because I hate Trump so much that I'm just this hard lefty liberal. I'm really at heart a libertarian. I think government does need to be simplified and streamlined and just makes everything so much harder than they need to be in so many cases. So, and I think this is an example of it. It shouldn't be a 14-step application with strict qualification requirements. The qualification requirement should be, have you been helpful to us during our military misadventure in Afghanistan? Oh, you have. Okay. According to the information that we have, yes, you have been helpful to us. You have assisted us. You have risked your life to help us. Well, guess what? Welcome to America. That should be the qualification. You literally risked your life and the health and well-being of you and your family to help us. Welcome. Welcome aboard. That should be how this goes. All right, continuing on here. Thanks to their connections to the U.S., these Afghans face grave risks in their home country. Right. In other words, yes, again, not to belabor the point, but they risked their own lives for us. I think we can be a little, grateful, maybe, at least. Okay. With the American option looking unlikely, many are fleeing to other countries instead, fearing murder at the hands of the Taliban. Two men who were unable to get visas through the SIV program have told Reason the stories of their dangerous escapes from Afghanistan. I probably won't say this gentleman's name correctly, but Habibullah started working with the U.S. Army in 2009 as an occupational health and safety manager, a position that took him to some of the most dangerous districts of Afghanistan. In 2019, the Taliban took notice of his work and began threatening his life. Having worked for the U.S. forces for almost 10 years, I don't want to keep butchering his name, but he decided to apply for an SIV. All his application materials were in order apart from the requisite letter of recommendation from a supervisor. Everything was normal in Afghanistan until then, he explains, saying he had no plans to leave. Quote, "So I did not request any recommendation from my supervisors," unquote. But as the U.S. withdrawal approached, the Taliban started seizing more territory and tensions escalated. Unfortunately, his supervisors had already left the country by the time the situation in Afghanistan pushed him to look for a new way out. He wrote to his former supervisors asking for help but received no response. It's so frustrating. That left his escape options limited. He and his family tried Turkey, but they were denied visas. They resolved to make the trip illegally, fearing they'd be killed by the Taliban if they stayed. Well, that's a familiar story. I mean, that's why undocumented immigrants, they cross the Rio Grande in deadly heat to get here because they're afraid of being killed at home. But this is a situation we created when we decided to pull up stakes and leave. Actually, when we decided to invade there to begin with. Imagine that. Imagine that, by the way, that, things that we do in terms of foreign policy in other parts of the world end up coming back to bite us in the ass, or at least they would if we cared enough to take care of the people who helped us when we showed up in their country. One of his friends introduced him to a man who coordinated illegal passage to Turkey. He charged the equivalent of $1,500 per head for the journey. Again, this is all very familiar, right? This is similar to how people get here from our southern border, to our southern border, I should say. $9,000 total for his family to make it out. Their journey took 3 miserable weeks. Smugglers crammed 20 passengers into cars, and this is in the COVID era, by the way. 20 passengers into cars intended for just 5 to 7 people. There was no water or food for up to 15 hours every day. Drivers raced across tough terrain out of fear they'd be caught by immigration authorities. His children start crying when the journey comes up in conversation, he says. They recall marching for several days through mountains, deserts, and forests. The smugglers kept them captive for 10 days until the family agreed to pay $2,400 in addition to the agreed-upon $9,000, threatening to kill them otherwise. They stole their mobile phones, jewelry, watches, and anything else of value. While his family finally reached Turkey, they couldn't walk properly for weeks and months because of the brutal journey. Even so, it could have been worse. He remembers seeing several deceased immigrants along the route through Iran, their bodies neglected by the authorities. He couldn't work in Turkey since he and his family had come without papers. He returned to Afghanistan to make money for his family and apply for a visa. He received it and is now legally present in the country, though his wife and children are not, and he does not have a work permit. His 4 young children cannot go to school. Quote, "I am trying to find any chance to move to USA for my kids' future," unquote. His visa expires soon, leaving his future unwritten. There's a second story here, but let's look at the Facebook live chat because there's a lot of comments in here. This stuff makes me so angry. Dan Lavasser in the chat room points out Fox News, the Republican network, now runs disclaimers on their screen when Trump speaks. We'll come back to that. We'll get to that, Dan. They did that during CPAC. Dirk Don says, "I'm sure Matt won't feel the same way, but I advocate for bullying politicians, even if we like them. Keep them in line because they must work for us." No, Dirk, I do feel the same way. I do feel the same way. That's you and I are of like mind on this. That's why I say on the show, I have a unique, not entirely unique, obviously, because you feel this way too. But I believe that we get it all wrong in this country, and a lot of it has to do with the two-party duopoly, where people just have this attitude that, they'll support a candidate or a party, but they'll support a candidate, and then once that candidate is elected, they will praise that candidate for all that the candidate does that they liked and that, all the reasons that they voted for them, but then will just turn a blind eye and whistle past the graveyard on anything that they don't like or any promises that are broken. I believe that when you successfully elect a candidate who you support, you should then spend the next 2 years or 4 years or 6 years, whatever term it is, depending on the office. You should then spend that time that they're in office. Yes, of course, give them credit for the good things that they do, for the things that they follow through on that you appreciate and support. But also call them out at every opportunity for everything you see that you don't like. Absolutely. Hold them accountable. But in this two-party duopoly that we have in this country, Republicans generally are only interested in holding Democrats accountable, and Democrats generally are only interested in holding Republicans accountable. And that, by the way, is part of the reason why politicians get away with so much that they get away with. Because only 50% of the people are going to hold them accountable. The other 50% are going to look the other way and be fine with everything that they do. Imagine, let's say you worked for a company. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. We'll take this out of politics and into the quote-unquote real world. Say you worked for a company, a large company, and you're in what we would call middle management. And maybe you're not the nicest person. Maybe you're not the most ethical, the most professional, and you decide to do some things that are wrong. Maybe you're verbally abusive to people in lower management, people who work for you. Or maybe you're doing some things, maybe you're embezzling from the company, or who knows? You're just doing bad things, right? And it's so bad that there are people in lower, you're in middle management. You've got people in lower management who are complaining to upper management about you. But here's the thing. It just so happens that in upper management, let's say in upper management in this company, 51% of the people in upper management happen to like you. 49% of the people in upper management don't like you. But a majority of the people in upper management do like you. And you know that. Well, you're going to get away with whatever, right? Doesn't matter what lower management says. Now, I know this is all very reductive and hyperbolic, but I'm just using it as an example. This is why politicians get away with everything. You can be you can be the least ethical person in the world. It doesn't matter. Really, at the end of the day, you have this enormous organization, this apparatus that is going to support you no matter what, regardless of which side of the aisle that you're on. You're only going to be held accountable by approximately 50% of your peers. So, no, I strongly agree with you, Dirk. Believe me, that's my entire political philosophy right there. And if everyone adopted that, regardless of ideology, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum, if everyone actually wanted to hold their own accountable, I think it would be a very different country. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's this?
Hi, Matt. Ron, one more time.
Hey, Ron.
I hate like heck to interrupt what you were discussing, but I had to because I wanted to ask you, did you watch 60 Minutes last night talking about the atrocities in Syria with President Assad and the cover-up? They had people that were photographers that went undercover and just took all the genocide that was going on just because if you didn't agree with him, to disagree with him was a death sentence. So I was just wondering if you saw it, because if you did, it was just unbelievable.
I didn't see it, Ron, but I will go online and look for it because I think CBS puts everything online after it airs. I will take a look for that. That sounds very interesting.
Okay, that's all I wanted to ask. I'll continue listening now.
No, great call, Ron. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, that's never an interruption, Ron. Please don't ever. Yeah, I appreciate the calls. Absolutely. That does open up a line for you, though, if you'd like to chime in. 603-250-6007. 603-250-6007. Scott Robinson, regarding the situation in Afghanistan, says, what a perfect way to make allies into new enemies. Absolutely. Well, yeah, the thing is, Scott, too, in a broader sense, the more things that we do to damage American credibility, the harder we make it for ourselves long term in terms of foreign policy, right? And this is a great example. If we don't keep our promises to people, then it's really difficult to have good faith negotiations with people that we need to deal with in the world, certainly. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's this?
This is Mark. What's going on, man?
Hello?
Hello, this is Mark.
Somebody pocket dial me?
No. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. What's up?
What's going on, Matt? This is Mark.
Hey,
down in
Mark.
Texas.
How's it going?
It's going good. Hey, I'm looking at your shirt. What does it say? Is it?
My shirt says asthma because of all the things I could be bad at, I suck at breathing. Yeah, Jenny got this for me after I was, I don't know if you've heard me tell the story, but Christmas night of 2019, I was having difficulty breathing and I ended up in the emergency room and I was diagnosed with asthma, which is why in my household, we suspect that because we now know that COVID-19 was in the country at that point, we just didn't know about it yet. I may have had COVID because it's a little unusual for a guy in his 40s to be diagnosed with asthma. Usually that's something you find out when you have when you're a kid. So I may have had COVID and it may have damaged my lungs. And so now I use a maintenance inhaler every day and I'm asthmatic.
I hear you, but I've been asthmatic since my first round of immunization shots when I was about 6 months old.
Oh, no kidding.
It was an autoimmune response that I had to the injections.
Oh, see, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know you were asthmatic. So do you have to?
Yeah.
I never knew that. Do you use an inhaler?
At this point, only when necessary, which is usually fall and spring.
Okay.
Maybe in the winter.
Gotcha. Oh.
Down here, it's a lot better for me down here.
Oh, that's good. Good. Well, what's on your mind, Mark?
Well, I heard you talking about government politics, and I'm a voluntary anarchist.
Yes.
And I think that if we we all understand and realize that no man is fit to rule over another. It's really the ultimate conclusion you can only logically come to when it comes to government. And the fact that we have no accountability, in this country for any politician. Like you're talking about the 51% or the 49%. It's just a symptom of the disease. But I think that the cure is ultimately just ruling ourselves like we were intended to be.
Well, my problem. Well, I think we could have accountability if people had a healthier attitude about politics. Like I said, to me, the problem is people think that if you support someone, that means you have to just blindly go along with whatever, and only take issue with people on the other side of the aisle, and just assume that everyone on your side is perfect and everyone on the other side is evil. And that's just kind of a very reductive way that people look at politics. And I think if people looked at it more critically, I think that would help. My problem with the idea of anarchy and just having no government is I feel that this is how I see it. I feel, and I'm libertarian in a lot of ways. I'm essentially a civil libertarian. I'm a political square peg, but if you had to put me in a category, you might call me a left libertarian or a liberal libertarian. But I do think government has a role. But I think that government is inevitable. This is how I look at it. If you could, there's actually a Family Guy episode about this that deals with this, so you might have seen once. But I believe if you could just take an anarchist magic wand and just wave it, and all of a sudden there was no government and everyone could just, sort of quote unquote self-govern, I think inevitably what would happen immediately is you would have groups of people getting together saying, okay, well, nobody's in charge of anything now, but we need to put people in charge of certain things. So maybe this person could be in charge of this thing over here. Maybe this person could be in charge of this thing over here. Oh, but how do we decide who to put in charge of things? Well, we're probably going to have to vote on who's the best person to put in charge of this thing, who's the best person to put in charge of that thing. And it's just inevitable, Mark. That's why, to me, anarchy doesn't work. Government, it's the nature of humans. We organize, we group, we put people in charge of things, we vote on who should be in charge of what things. If you just waved a magic wand and all of a sudden there would be no government, almost immediately you'd have new government springing up. I don't think you can not have government. I think it's impossible.
Well, I'm listening to what you're saying, and what I'm hearing is that literally you're describing the definition of insanity, of doing the same thing over and over again, only to get the same result, but you're anticipating a different result for some reason. And I think...
I don't follow. I don't know what...
Well, anarchy comes from the Greek, anti-archon, which means no rulers. It doesn't mean no rules. And even to this day, on the mainstream media, you will always hear the word anarchy thrown around, and it's synonymous with chaos and violence and political upheaval. But that's not, in fact, what the word actually means. An archon means a ruler in Greek. And so anarchist just means no rulers, not no rules. Because natural law is always in effect. And it's immutable.
Yeah.
So, and I agree with what you're saying. If you listen to what you actually said, you said putting people in charge of things. And I can get on board with that.
Yeah.
Because when you're in charge of things like services or tasks or what have you in that regard, that's not the same as putting people in charge of other people. No one has the right to rule another. So if you can have your form of, again, waving the magic wand, if we could have people in charge of things instead of people, I think we'd be on the right path and off to a better road for all of us.
But by
because,
not...
power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Well,
as soon as you
I agree with.
You're basically, promoting the belief in slavery. Because the belief in authority is ultimately the belief in slavery, where someone has the right to rule over another, and I'm against that because I know the truth. The truth is nobody's fit to lead.
Well, then how do you prevent? So if you only have people in charge of things, so are you suggesting? So should there not be laws about what people do then? For example, like should it be okay to?
I refer to you. I'm taking it you don't understand what natural law is, and natural law is you still have the right to defend yourself. You still have the right to defend others. I mean, there's an 8-hour seminar I could send you on it where it goes over everything, every possible scenario you could ever throw up about the justification for government and authority. But ultimately, whatever you are doing or want to do, if it's not harming someone else or causing them a loss of any kind, then you have the right to do it. Plain and simple.
But so what if you choose not to do that, though? So what if you choose to do something that harms someone else? What is supposed to happen then?
They have the right to defend themselves, and other people have the right to pick up for them and defend them as well. I mean, if you think about it, in all of our laws, man's laws, was really derived from natural law. Thou shalt not kill. Because that causes harm to somebody else. You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to defend others. And ultimately, when the policemen arrest you, they're arresting you with the same citizen's arrest power that you and I have. They're paid to do it as a profession.
I do.
Trained to do it.
I do, yeah.
And given tools to do it.
I do understand.
But ultimately,
ultimately
badges don't grant extra rights. So they don't have any other rights that you and I have. We could do that too.
So, Mark, I do understand. I do understand the basic concepts. I have a lot of friends who are some who are very strict libertarians, and I have a lot of friends in the Free State Project here in New Hampshire who you might be familiar with. So, I've been exposed to a lot of these concepts. But the thing is, I kind of describe myself as a practical pragmatist, and I think these concepts, in theory, are beautiful. The idea of self-governance and nobody's in charge of anybody. I mean, I think that's great, and I would love it if that would work. But I don't see how it works practically. For example, okay, I have a right to defend myself. Great. So if someone comes in here right now with a gun and decides to shoot me, I have a right to defend myself. Great, except I'm a sitting duck. Someone could come in here with a gun right now and shoot me. Well, at least I died having had the right to defend myself. That's great. What's going to happen to the person who came in and shot me? Well, I guess nothing. No one's in charge of him. No one's ever going to be in charge of him, right? It's natural law. If someone wants to come in and shoot me, they can. I'm just sitting here. Come on, man. I want something to happen to that guy. I want someone to come and arrest him and convict him and put him in prison. So,
I think
it's a
you're
nice
under
idea.
the illusion that laws actually prevent violence from happening. In other words, just because there's a law against shooting you means that that's going to protect you in some way. Because, as you know, laws don't protect anyone from anything. They never have. They weren't designed to. They're only designed to punish after the fact.
I disagree. I disagree.
And you're in the studio with you had a gun, they could defend you as well. Because right now, there's nothing stopping anyone from doing that now. You know, the fact that we have police doesn't mean that, violence will never befall you. Just because we have police doesn't mean people don't get robbed.
Yeah.
Your question is the way to set up government is on a voluntary basis. In other words, you cannot compel with threat of violence and force and be on the side of the moral right. You cannot consider yourself a moral person if you're threatening violence against somebody else to compel them to do something you want to do, that you want them to do, rather. So everything should be based. So the answer to your question is you base everything on a voluntary basis. That's why I said I'm a voluntarist. And I think ultimately, if you follow your libertarian ideology, you will ultimately come to the logical conclusion that every interaction we have with each other as human beings must be voluntary. It cannot be coerced or threatened with violence, and you'll be on the right track. Because ultimately, that's how we rule ourselves. We can make voluntary interactions. That's what originally the economy was based on: the voluntary interactions between, a seller and a buyer.
Yeah, I think it's all a very nice idea, Mark. I just don't think it works. I think it's all a nice. I said, and I used the word beautiful earlier, and I meant it, by the way, just to be clear. I'm not being sarcastic or anything. I think it's a beautiful idea. I just don't think it works, and I think it places a very high value on human nature. A high expectation of human nature. I'll tell you about a conversation I had once with someone. This girl, Lauren, I forget her last name, but this was when I used to associate a lot more than I do now with the Free State Project. Because when I realized a lot of libertarians are really just right-wing conservatives who think it's cooler to call themselves libertarians, I got a little bit turned off by a lot of these people. I'm not saying that
I think you've had the same experience that I had. Like whatever the group is, and it always seems to start. Even BLM, for example, it always starts off with my right idea, and it's a grassroots movement, and it's organic and authentic. But then it gets co-opted and infiltrated, and taken over by other groups.
Oh, sure.
Once it becomes big enough to be considered a threat.
There's a lot of examples of that. But I had a conversation with this girl, Lauren, once at an event, and she was talking about how, it was important to get rid of all the regulations. Every regulation you could think of in terms of capitalism, banking regulations and just all of it, because her argument was the only reason that people commit fraud and do these things is because of government and because of all the regulations, and that if you just take away all the regulations, people will ultimately do the right thing. And it was that conversation with her that made me realize, these are beautiful ideas, but they cannot possibly work in the real world. The idea
but they do every day.
Huh?
And I can give you an example of that. When you leave there and you drive out of there, everyone drives on the right-hand side of the road. Everyone stops. I know there's a few exceptions. I'm not trying to make a broad generalization, but generally speaking, people conduct themselves in peaceful manners and voluntary interactions with each other every single day.
Right.
And there's not a policeman in every single vehicle driving around with you to make sure that you obey the laws. Correct? So it is human nature, and you see examples of it every day. The fact that you don't believe that is just because you're a victim of propaganda that we've been, propagandized our whole life to believe that we have to have government, we have to have these things, because otherwise it would be chaos And again, they misuse the word anarchy to prove their point, although it literally means no rulers, not no rules, because there's always going to be natural law. There's always going to be, the rules of karma in effect.
Well, I have to,
because we are ultimately one. We all are one. So what you do to one person, you're really doing to yourself, and that's why karma works the way it does.
Well, I have to object to the notion that the only reason I believe what I believe is because I've been propagandized to. I mean, I do have a fully functioning brain and a mind of my own, and I have arrived at these conclusions as such. And I think that's a big part of why I'm such a political square peg, is because I have a mind of my own and I don't just believe whatever I'm told and stick to an ideology. But I do think, your example about the traffic is, I see a lot of people get pulled over for, I saw it happen just the other day. I saw somebody blow through a red light, and clearly they didn't know a cop was sitting there, didn't see them. It was at night, and they got pulled over for it. And I think that's great. I want the cop to pull that guy over, because if the cop doesn't pull that guy over, one of these days that guy's going to blow through a red light and T-bone somebody and kill a family. Or,
Sure.
when I see a drunk driver, this will be a very unpopular thing with some of the audience, I'm sure, because people get mad at me when I say this. But when I see a story about a drunk driver getting pulled over and they end up, getting taken to jail, and they end up losing their license, and they end up, having their lives turned upside down because they were driving drunk, I'm glad. I feel zero sympathy for that individual. I'm glad they got in trouble. I'm glad their life is ruined, because that drunk driver might potentially kill a family out on the road who's perfectly innocent, but they get hit by that drunk driver might kill me. I think government is helpful.
I'm in agreement with you.
Well,
I don't disagree with what you're saying, and I would even go further to say that their lives don't get ruined, Matt. That they get a temporary setback financially and possibly incarcerated for a short period of time.
Yeah,
and it's a far cry from taking someone else's life away who doesn't even get to wake up the next day.
Right.
So I'm not in disagreement with you about that. We that's why I said no rulers just means there's not one person in charge of everyone else. It still means that there's still rules to follow, and that would, again, I would refer to natural law, because do no harm are the three words that make up the natural law.
But I don't know how you can have
driving intoxicated and hurting other people is creating harm.
Right. But how can you have rules to follow with no enforcement mechanism?
Well, originally it was up to the individual. I mean, if you look at Texas culture versus New Hampshire, down here the children are raised to say yes sir and no ma'am, and they're very polite. And if you follow it back through, where did that come from? Well, when everyone had a gun on their hip, and you could get shot for cheating at poker, it made for a very polite society.
Well,
because everyone was on an equal playing field.
Well, that's not much.
As far as
that's not much. That's not much different from here, Mark. New Hampshire is armed to the teeth. We're one of the most heavily armed states in the country.
Yeah, I'm just saying that but y'all aren't as polite because they consider us Yankees rude. But I've discovered culturally why that is.
Yeah.
It's ultimately because I think New Englanders and people that and statistically they've proven this. The people that cuss and swear a lot are generally more honest. And so
I've heard
down
that
here, the culture is to wait till someone's out of the room and talk about them. Versus up north where you wait until your friend shows up so you can say what you have to say in front of him and whoever else is around, but you don't, talk behind their back per se as much as you just wait till they come around and you have something to say, you say right to their face.
Yeah.
At least, that's the way, we were raised that way, up that way. And they consider that rude just because they think it's more polite to talk behind their back.
Well, Mark, I will say,
that's a cultural difference.
I think we have some agreement on this, actually, because I've been to the South, and people in the South are definitely more polite. I think there's a and not just in the South, actually, but also the Midwest, even, because I spent a lot of time in the Midwest growing up because I have family out there, and people are just friendlier to strangers in other parts of the country. There's something about the Northeast. I don't know if it's the winter here. Well, it can't be the winter because the Midwest winter is tough, but there's something about the Northeast where just people are like really uptight around strangers. But what can you do?
Yeah, I've heard that, but I've also heard, I've had people that go up that way and they've never been to New England and they're from Texas or this area or anywhere from the South. And they've had, because people are people no matter where you go.
Yeah.
They've had wonderful experiences and thought they were the friendliest people on the planet
Mm.
because I think it's like a novelty. I remember, when you and I growing up, we didn't have a lot of people that were from other areas. Most people you either knew your whole life or they moved from somewhere nearby.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It is always a novelty to have somebody from a different culture that you could learn something from because it was, unfamiliar from, what we were taught growing up.
Oh, definitely. And when you live up here too, when you're talking to someone who's here from, say, from down south and they've got that Southern accent, it's just, you're going to be nice to them because you want to talk to them because you want to hear them talk because it's just fun. It's cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The funny thing is when I tell people where I'm from and where I grew up, they say, well, you don't have an accent. Because some of the years I've lost it. Although it does come back when I drink and when I go back up north to visit.
Oh, no kidding.
It comes right back.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, Mark, we're past the top of the hour. I'm late for a break, but I do enjoy talking to you, old friend. And I look forward to seeing you when you come up in August.
Yes, sir. I don't know if we're going to have a college, a high school reunion thing going on or whatever, but I got some people and I'll hit you up and let you know. I know I told Jenny we'd swing through.
Yeah.
Probably catch up with you.
Absolutely. Sounds great. All right, Mark. Thank you so much for the call, my friend.
All right, man.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. All right, my old friend Mark Kastick from Texas. Well, he used to be from here, obviously. I do want to get to a lot of Facebook live chat activity. I do want to get to those, but we are late for a break, so let's do this. You know what I think I'm going to do, actually, because there's a lot I want to get to. I'm not going to play a song like I usually do. We'll just do the commercial spots quickly, get that out of the way so we can show some love to our wonderful sponsors and make sure we keep paying the bills. And then we'll just come right back quick.
I stand up here giving speeches for an hour and a half, many times without notes.
Welcome back, everybody. We are well into hour number 2, numero dos of Matt Connarton Unleashed, and we are live from the studios of WMNH 95.3 FM in hot, humid downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. I guess it's not that hot today, but it is humid. Maybe it'll rain. We do need the rain. Of course, we're also on Comcast 97 if you're in Manchester, streaming at WMNHradio.org and on the Facebook, on the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page. You can also go to my website, mattconnerton.com, for all of your live streaming options and social media links and contact info and show archives, etc., etc. You can learn more about what I do when I'm not here every weekday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. Also, hello to our friends at Raw Talk Online. And I do want to remind you, of course, that on Wednesday of this week, so today is Monday, July 12th, on Wednesday, July 14th, we will be right across the street at the Hop Knot for a live remote from 4 to 6 p.m. and really looking forward to that. I know Peter White will be there with us as well. I'm not sure if Peter will be on the air with me or not. We'll see what happens. He's always welcome to, of course. I don't know how many mics we'll have available. This is my first live remote doing this program here at WMNH. I know the morning show has done several of them, quite a few of them actually, over the years. But this is the first live remote here at WMNH in the post-pandemic era. And Peter felt that the first one of the new era should be at the Hop Knot. So during this program. So really looking forward to that. So please, if you're around, come on by on Wednesday. We'll be right across the street at the Hop Knot. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's this?
Hello, this is Ozzy Osbourne calling you again.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Yes, how are you? I heard you were talking about accents, and people say I have one.
Well, yes, Ozzy, you do have a bit of a, you are British. It stands to reason you would have a British accent.
Yes, I tried to do y'all when I was in Texas at the Alamo, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, you seem to, if I remember correctly, Ozzy, you had a little bit of an incident at the Alamo in Texas, if I recall.
Oh, I was just trying to relieve myself. I don't know why it was such a problem.
Well, it was you can't do that in public, Ozzy, and certainly not at the Alamo. I don't think they tolerate that in Texas. Do you know, by the way, since you were in Texas, do you know my friend Texas Mike?
No, I don't, but I thought it was by a garage.
Oh, I understand. Well, the garage and Alamo, I mean, when you're drunk, it all looks the same, I guess.
Oh, my gosh. But I won't tell you, good luck with your remote. That sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun for you.
Thank you, Ozzy, and I would love it if you and Sharon can come by. That would be great. It'd be great to see you both.
Well, we're at the beach. We'll see what we can do.
Maybe have a delicious gourmet pretzel.
That would be on the hot knot. Oh, I love the name,
Yes, of course. They also have craft
good to
beer.
talk to you, Matt, and, don't forget to buy my albums.
I have all of your albums, Ozzy. I was listening to The Ultimate Sin just earlier today. I say that with apologies, of course, to my evangelical listeners. But yes, one of my favorites.
Oh, evangelical. Yeah, I sang with them once.
No, that's... you did you? Oh. Oh.
Back in the day, I was much younger than kind of a philanthropist then, but always a pleasure to talk to you, Matt, and keep the show going there, eh?
Well, thank you, Ozzy. It's wonderful to speak with you, and please don't ride any ATVs.
Oh, you're always the wise guy.
I know. All right, take care, Ozzy. All right, wow. That's very exciting to hear from Ozzy Osbourne. I think this is the first time he's called my show. He did call once when I was on Retro Spectrum Radio, which, of course, you can hear every Friday night at 7:30 with the great Paulie C. and Dan Randlett. Sometimes DJ Steve joins us. But I seem to recall Ozzy calling into that program once. But I think this is the first time he's called me on Matt Connarton Unleashed. He sounds great. He's had some health issues and whatnot, but he sounds just vibrant, dare I say. Well, that opens up a line for you, 603-250-6007. If you'd like to join us this afternoon, 603-250-6007. We should, I want to, some great comments in the Facebook live chat, by the way, and I want to kind of pick up on these. They relate to the, I do want to get to CPAC. We'll try to get to that, but I want to look at some of these as they relate to we were talking earlier in the first hour about our presence, or I should say our exit from Afghanistan and some of the things that have seemed to be going a bit awry with that. And by the way, I will share out that article. I think maybe I already did. The article from Reason.com that I was reading earlier about these translators who are in this terrible position here where they can't seem to get the paperwork straightened out so they can come to the United States. So, we leave them to die. Scott Robinson says, this is just like history repeating itself for when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, then we went to help and then left them high and dry. Absolutely. Like I was saying earlier, when our troops first arrived in Afghanistan, when W decided to start that war, one of the things they found... Sorry, I forgot to turn that fan off. I don't know if the mic actually picks it up, but one of the things that they found immediately was a lot of old abandoned Soviet, there were Soviet tanks. Nothing that was in working order, of course, but, that had just been sitting there, that when the Russians left, they left all that sitting there. Let's see, Dirk Don, and this relates to the conversation I was having with my old friend Mark Kastick about anarchism and so forth. Dirk says, yes, we would eventually form governments anyway. I don't think anarchists understand how human nature works. Right, and that's regarding my point. And Dirk is a libertarian, but that was my point, that, even if you had no government, if you could just say, as I like to say, if you could just wave an anarchist magic wand and suddenly there's no government, it's not like everyone's going to say, oh, okay, so I guess we'll all just govern ourselves. Governments would form. It is human nature to do that. And that, to me, that is the glaring flaw with anarchy. Tom Blanchard says, sounds like a Mad Max movie. Mike Sutterth is in the chat room on Facebook. Mike says, great stuff. Mike, of course, will be here tomorrow afternoon. Mike is here with us every Tuesday in the 5 o'clock hour for his wonderful Tweakonomics segment. And he says in the chat, see you tomorrow at 5. We're going to dive into inflation. Oh, very good. That is a big topic right now. Inflation is spiking. And from what I was reading just today, those prices are not going to come back down for a while, but we'll hear what Mike has to say about it tomorrow. That should be very interesting. Dirk Don of Arrogant Media, by the way, celebrating 600 subscribers. Congratulations, Dirk. Dirk says, wolves have a leader because they've been propagandized into having one and thinking it's needed. That's great. Our friend DJ Midas is in the Facebook live chat. John Midas Manning. Midas, of course, part of the WMNH family. He is the host of Late Night Delight, which you can hear every Saturday night beginning at 12 midnight all the way to 4 a.m. with a replay on Sunday. And he is doing a residency at Central Ale House. He's there every Sunday at Central Ale House right here in Manchester from 3 to 8 p.m., followed by Christian Lacoste, DJ Reckless, who is there every Sunday from 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. Hard to keep track of all this. Anyway, Midas says, either find a piece of land no one owns, if that still exists, claim it and defend it, or take a piece of land by force. Those are two situations where you can declare the laws. Otherwise, follow the rules or change them legally. Tom Blanchard says, we don't all think alike and not everyone has the same breaking point. Some people do have a hair trigger. Mark posted a couple of links in the Facebook live chat about natural law. Like I said, I think it's a beautiful concept. All of that, natural law, anarchy, it's all wonderful. But I just don't think it works. I like to describe myself as a non-ideological, practical pragmatist. And I don't think any of that works practically and pragmatically in the world in which we live. I think that, and again, like I said, I'm a libertarian at heart. But I think that you need some level of government. I think there are some things you need government to do. That is not an embrace of the idea that government should control everything or what. Some people have this sort of binary view of it, like, well, you either have to be for big government controlling everything and socialism and all that, or you can be in favor of freedom and capitalism and whatnot. None of these are mutually exclusive concepts. That's why I always complain about, and if you're a longtime listener, you've heard me complain about this. Some people will say, well, you have to choose. You have to make a choice. We're either going to have socialism or capitalism because you can't have both. And it's such a reductive and unsophisticated, in my view, and this binary way of looking at it that doesn't even make sense. We do have both. We literally do have both. We have socialism and we have capitalism. Capitalism is everywhere. It's easy to see where that is. Socialism, we have social programs. We have government programs. We have one particular socialist program that is enormously popular among Americans, even among conservatives. Social Security. It's right there in the name. So, we have both. We've always had both. We always will have both. They coexist quite nice. Actually, coexist wouldn't even be the right way of putting it. They commingle. They depend on each other. Now, we can have discussions about, well, do you want more government or less government? Do you want more regulation or less regulation? Do you want more spending or less spending? We can have all these discussions. And by the way, those are discussions we should be having on an ongoing basis, of course. We can play with the mixture and, figure that out, as we'll continue to do and we'll continue to argue about indefinitely into the future. But there's this weird thing in the last few years that started to happen where people began to look at it as this bizarre, false binary choice between capitalism or socialism. Let's see, let me back up a little bit here. Mike Pelopita said, maybe Lars will call in. Ozzy's laugh sounds very close to that Santa Claus laugh. Yes, it does, doesn't it? I noticed that too, Mike. Midas says, sounds like Jerky Boy's Egyptian magician versus Ozzy mashup. Interesting. Mark Kastick says, natural law is the only rule. Everything else is politics and someone else's idea of how you should live your life. What happened to live free or die? Dirk Don says, I should introduce you to my good friend Kirk Wilcox, who talks about issues of socialism versus capitalism on his YouTube channel. Yes, that would be wonderful, Dirk. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. Oh, wow. It's already almost 5:30. Well, we should talk about, because I brought it up earlier, CPAC was, this one was in Dallas, where Mark is in the great state of Texas. This is from thehill.com, 5 takeaways from the CPAC conference in Dallas. And as I mentioned earlier, and I haven't had a chance to really look at this, but I want to go through these. It won't take that long. But I did mention earlier that as far as I know, at this CPAC, unlike the last one, which was 6 months ago, so I guess they do these twice a year. Unlike the last one, as far as I know, there was no golden statue of, the Republican Messiah, Donald Trump, for people to worship at or polish. I'm sure it needs polishing. Midas says, I should introduce you to my good friend Stacy Wilcox, who talks about cigarettes and karate on his YouTube channel. Yes, everyone check out Stacy Wilcox. Stacy Wilcox, banned from this program, by the way, or at least this version of the program. When we introduce our supplemental online-only version, which will probably be maybe once a week, Stacy will be allowed on that. But we don't have him on this iteration of the program anymore. I got suspended for 2 days because of that guy. No hard feelings, though. I love Stacy. Anyway, so 5 takeaways from the CPAC conference in Dallas. Now, well, here, let me read the no golden statue. Nor, by the way, in case you're wondering, spoiler alert, no, Trump did not announce that he's going to be running for president in 2024, although I think it's a foregone conclusion. I dare say, I do believe that Donald Trump is the presumptive nominee. I mean, he'll definitely be the nominee if he runs. The only way he would not be the nominee is if he doesn't run. And actually, even if he doesn't run, maybe Republicans everywhere will just write him in and draft him to be the Republican nominee. Because, they're so, I always say, I don't know many Republicans who like Donald Trump. Most Republicans I know are deeply, deeply in love with Donald Trump. So he still has their hearts, clearly. I mean, I would imagine even if he's in jail, he'll still be the nominee. You can run from prison, right? Lyndon LaRouche used to do it. He used to, I remember back in 1992, he was on the ballot. He was on the ballot for the Democrats here in New Hampshire, and he was in prison at the time. So let's see. So here's what it says here. The Republican faithful flocked to Dallas for the Conservative Political Action Conference over the weekend as the GOP strategizes ahead of the 2022 and 24 election cycles. The confab marked an opportunity for the grassroots to rub shoulders with leaders of the GOP, including former President Trump, who are jockeying for position with activists and voters ahead of re-election bids next year, as well as potential presidential campaigns 3 years from now. The bash also highlighted the issues that are currently animating the party's base 6 months into the Biden administration, including gripes over the 2020 election, critical race theory, and more. Here are the 5 takeaways from the weekend's conference. Now, I'm not going to do these in order. I am going to skip down to the 5th one. And then we will go back to number 1. So I'm going to start with number 5, and then we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, if we have time. Reason being, number 5 on the list hits close to home. And as I read this to you, if you are a regular listener of the show, you will understand without me having to explain it why this hits close to home from my perspective. The 5th takeaway, COVID-19 plays outsized role. So here's what it says here. The conference also put partisan divides over the coronavirus pandemic and vaccination efforts into stark relief. Surveys and research have already shown that Democrats are more likely than Republicans to get vaccinated, and that counties that supported Trump in 2020 are lagging behind their Biden-backed counterparts in their vaccination efforts. The refusal by swaths of the Republican base to get vaccinated was accentuated by applause at the conference in response to a comment about the government's headwinds toward expanding vaccinations among the public. Conservative author Alex Berenson said over the weekend, sparking applause from the audience, quote, "The government was hoping they could sort of sucker 90% of the population into getting vaccinated, and it isn't happening," unquote. So he said that, and there was applause. So, just to remind everyone, the Republicans are the anti-science party. The trend undercuts a key Democratic argument heading into the midterms, which is that voters will be grateful to the Biden administration for its efforts to put the pandemic in the rearview mirror and back Democrats in 2022. But more than that, health officials warned it could prolong the fight against the virus and lead to more infections, variants, and deaths. Let's see. There's a little bit more to that, but that's not the one. I thought there was. So when I said I wanted to look at number 5 first, I was wrong when I said that one hit particular. I mean, it hits close to home in that, I'm very concerned about the pandemic. But I thought there was something in here about these Republicans putting down. Here it is. I'm sorry. So when I went to number 5, I should have gone to number 4. I found the one this is what I meant when I said this one hits close to home. You'll understand in a moment. Gnome comes out swinging. Not gnome as in like a garden gnome, but gnome as in Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. All right, here, this is the one that I was referring to. While much of the attention centered around Trump at the weekend conference, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, another potential 2024 contender, also drew headlines over her remarks about other states' restrictions during the coronavirus pandemic. Noem specifically took aim at other Republican governors for putting in place what she suggested were overly harsh measures aimed at combating the spread of the virus. You know where I'm going with this. She said this, quote, "We've got Republican governors across this country pretending they didn't shut down their states and they didn't close their regions and they didn't mandate masks. Now, I'm not picking fights with Republican governors. All I'm saying is that we need leaders with grit, that their first instinct is the right instinct," unquote. So here's where this hits close to home for me. We have here in New Hampshire a Republican governor, Governor Chris Sununu, and I know a lot of my audience has problems with Governor Chris Sununu. I have problems with Governor Chris Sununu. But I did vote for him. He's the one Republican on the ballot I voted for in 2020. You know why? Because we have a Republican governor who believes in science, who chose to take the COVID-19 pandemic very seriously, and who did enact mitigation restrictions, whatever you want to call them, took the steps to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 in New Hampshire. Every one of which I agreed with. Now, again, I said earlier, hey, I'm a libertarian at heart. I don't want the government, doing a lot of this stuff. However, hey, I've been mocked by people on the other side of this issue for saying this, but I'll say it anyway. I know it's a cliche, but it's, in this case, in my view, it happens to be true that sometimes extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures be taken. And a global pandemic, which only happens once every 100 years, a global pandemic, I viewed it and still do as an existential threat. There were some very unpleasant, unfortunate things that had to be done. And our Republican governor, while the base of his own party is furious at him, calling him every name imaginable, calling him a sellout, calling him a traitor, calling him a communist, calling him a rhino, a Republican in name only, which, that or somehow not being a disciple of Trump, those are the two worst things you can call a Republican in this era. They called him everything you could imagine. And here's the thing. So Kristi Noem, she wants to talk about grit. Oh, we need Republicans with grit. She says, I'm not picking a fight with those Republican governors who chose to take the steps to mitigate the virus. I'm not picking a fight with them, but we need Republicans with grit. We need leaders with grit. You know what I think grit is? I think grit is when you're the leader of a party in your state and you have to go against the anti-science, COVID denier, right-wing conspiracy-loving base of your own party. You have to look those people in the face every damn day and say, no, you're wrong. This is serious. We're going to do what we have to do to get through this so that our healthcare system doesn't collapse, so that all the intensive care units in every hospital in the state doesn't end up full, so that we don't end up like a place like New York City was at one point, where we got to bring in refrigeration trucks to stuff the dead bodies because we've run out of room because so many people are dying from COVID. We don't want to end up like that. So we're going to do what we have to do to get through this without ending up like that. And he did what he had to do, and he was successful at it, and this state has weathered the storm phenomenally well. And then the vaccines became available, and this governor had to look in the faces of the anti-science, anti-vaxxer, COVID denier base of his own party and say, no, we're going to get people vaccinated. I'm not going to force anybody to do it, but we're going to make these vaccines available to as many people in our state as possible, as quickly as possible. We're going to do it so that our ICUs don't get full, so that we're not stuffing dead bodies into refrigeration trucks, et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to allow the anti-science, anti-vaxxer base of the Republican Party to cause a whole lot of people to die who didn't have to die. That is grit. When you have to go against your own party, who are calling you every name imaginable just to do the right thing and try to keep people safe, that is grit. And again, I know my audience, I know because I hear it, I see it in the chat room sometimes. A lot of problems with Governor Sununu. I have problems with Governor Sununu. But I voted for him in 2020 for the same reason I voted for Joe Biden for the president. I split the ticket. I'm an independent, so I vote all over the place. Although, again, Sununu was the only Republican I voted for in 2020 because, well, reasons. But I voted for them for the same reason. I saw this as an existential threat. I saw this as something to be taken seriously. I'm sitting here wearing a shirt that says asthma on it. And I'm sorry, but to the people who will say, well, if you're so worried about the virus, just stay home. It doesn't work that way. You know, I mean, unless you want the economy to continue to collapse and millions of Americans to starve to death, it doesn't work that way. Most people don't have that option. You know, if you're rich or if you have a work at home situation, great. Most people don't have that option. So our governor did what he had to do. And by the way, I disagree with, you know, we had some, George Hamblin was on the show recently, a couple of Fridays ago. I never got around to addressing this. I do want to get back to the CPAC thing before we run out of time, but it occurs to me I never had a chance to follow up on this. And I didn't want to get into it with him then because it would have, you know, deviated us from the discussion we were having at the time, what we were focused on. But George Hamblin joined us via Skype, and we had Gracie Gatto on the phone. This was 2 Fridays ago, and we were discussing a number of issues. But this came up, you know, and I don't think Gracie really talked about the governor's response to COVID, but George did, you know, and George is a liberal Democrat, and he was. And who I like, and I want to have him in studio, and we definitely will. And I really enjoyed talking with both he and with Gracie. Great guests. But George was critical of Sununu on one thing. He said, you know, about he kind of didn't give him any credit because his argument seemed to be that, well, New Hampshire is a small state and a relatively rural state. You know, we don't have major population centers, really. I mean, the biggest population center we have is Manchester, and this is what are we considered, a small to mid-sized city? So it's actually not that hard to manage the pandemic when you're the governor of New Hampshire versus a much larger state. And he made this comparison. He said, you know, I'd like to see Chris Sununu have to manage a state like Massachusetts, because Massachusetts, also with a Republican governor, a very popular Republican governor, Charlie Baker, who also took the pandemic very seriously and initiated mitigation steps, which were pretty severe but necessary in my view. George basically said, you know, he'd like to see Governor Sununu have to deal with that, what Massachusetts went through, when what Massachusetts went through was much more severe and more difficult to manage. And I take George's point, but again, here in New Hampshire, and I'm not saying Charlie Baker didn't have to deal with this as well, because Charlie Baker also had to deal with Republicans in his own party, you know, questioning him and saying, well, questioning is fine, actually, you should question, but criticizing him for the steps that he was taking. But I don't think anything on the level of here, because Massachusetts Republicans and New Hampshire Republicans, again, I'm speaking in the macro sense, in a broad sense, but not necessarily the same. I mean, Massachusetts Republicans are going to be more centrist. You know, to be a Republican in Massachusetts, you're probably going to be much more centrist than some of the folks we have here, some of whom are pretty right-wing, some of whom are pretty nuts, frankly. If you look at our state legislature, there's some crazy people there, frankly. But so I understood the point that George was making, but I still think, again, you want to talk about grit. Grit is when you got to stand up to your own people, to your own supporters, and say, I know you don't like what I'm doing, but you elected me to lead, and I'm leading, and I'm going to lead us through this. So I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that, but I think that's grit. Grit is not what Kristi Noem is suggesting, where you just put your head in the sand and let your constituents die because your party has decided not to believe in science and instead believe in crazy conspiracy theories. And what did the 600,000 plus Americans who have died from this, what are they, all crisis actors pretending to be dead or whatever crazy, bizarre things these people believe. But that was what hit close to home for me, was her comments about grit. Let's see. We'll speaking of conspiracy theories, we'll run through the other three of these. So the first takeaway was conspiracy theories linger among the base. Conspiracy theories around the 2020 election and the January 6th insurrection abounded at the conference, underscoring the depths to which the base has internalized Trump's unfounded claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him. Attendees chanted 4 more years while the former president was on stage, and Trump repeated the allegation that widespread fraud and other irregularities swayed the November contest away from him and toward Biden, an assertion for which he's provided no substantive evidence. He said, quote, "This must never happen to another party's presidential candidate again. It can never happen. We're a laughingstock all over the world. A laughingstock," unquote. Trump also took aim at media outlets that point out that he has not presented evidence, claiming to applaud the instances of fraud are out there for supporters to see. They are. He said, quote, "Every time the media references the election hoax, they say the fraud is unproven. And while there is no evidence, there's so much evidence," unquote. Oh, okay. Sorry, dude. Didn't realize there was all this evidence. What, by the way, so what constitutes evidence? Is it Rudy Giuliani standing in front of Four Seasons landscaping and lawn care for 40 minutes just rambling incoherently? Is that the evidence? I don't know. I'm curious what the actual evidence is. Elsewhere at CPAC, merchandise was being sold to promote the baseless QAnon conspiracy theory, which posits that Trump will oversee a military takeover to oust from power a cabal of satanic child sex traffickers. Ooh, that's exciting. I mean, I don't want to see that happen, but, you know, it would make for great television. Recent polls have shown the extent to which conspiracy theories surrounding the election and other issues have seeped into the Republican mainstream. A Morning Consult Politico poll released last month showed that a slim majority of Republican voters believe that state-level reviews of the 2020 presidential election will reveal new information and reverse the outcome of the contest. Ooh. So that was the first takeaway. The second takeaway we talked about. Third takeaway, culture war issues dominate. You know, because that's what you go to when you don't have any ideas. The CPAC conference underscored just how animated the GOP base is by a handful of culture issues, including claims equating Democrats to socialists, immigration, the debate over critical race theory, and so-called cancel culture. Trump made sure to hit on several of those issues during his speech, ensuring they will remain front of mind for GOP voters moving forward. He said, quote, "This is a very, very special place, and we're going to keep it the way it is. With the help of everyone here today, we will defeat the radical left, the socialist, Marxist, and the critical race theorists. We will secure our borders. We will stop left-wing cancel culture. We will restore free speech and fair elections, and we will make America great again," unquote. Ooh. The stuff about the radical left always tickles me because we have a president who is, you know, really just kind of a standard Northeastern corporate centrist Democrat who is actually, people on the, what I guess you would call the far left, are getting pretty frustrated with the guy, you know, because he's not, I mean, I'm sorry. There's nothing radical or leftist about Joe Biden. President Joe Biden is, in my view, exactly who any reasonable person surmised him to be. And when I say reasonable person, I don't mean the people who say, "Oh, he's a radical lefty. He's a puppet of the left. He's just there to do AOC's bidding." You know, that evil AOC. No, Joe Biden is exactly who Joe Biden has always been. There's no, if you're looking for some super lefty radical commie guy, that ain't him. He's not the boogeyman. This is not the boogeyman you're looking for. That was meant to be a Star Wars reference, but I'm not really a Star Wars guy, so I don't know why I bothered with that. Anyway, let's see. The remarks come as Republicans rail against Biden's decision to remove Trump-era immigration restrictions. Oh, the horror. Claiming the president's policies are leading to a spike in attempted border crossings and ongoing recriminations over the 2020 race. However, it is critical race theory, which posits that racism is deep-seated in the history of the U.S. and its current laws. It has become the leading front in the culture wars. The issue has roiled school boards across the country and led Republican governors to sign laws banning the teaching of it in public schools, even though schools in those states were not teaching it. Let's see. That was the second takeaway. The third one we already... Oh, no, I guess we already... Oh, we blew through those. Okay. Did we... Oh, this is the one we missed. I'm sorry. I knew I skipped one, and we're almost out of time. Trump's popularity remains strong. And again, this is why I say I believe he is the presumptive nominee in 2024. Trump's popularity among the GOP base was proven again during CPAC's straw poll taken of its attendees, underscoring his ongoing role as the de facto head of the party. Trump led the straw poll of potential 2024 contenders with 70% of respondents saying they would vote for him in the Republican primary if it were held today. 70%. That is a, what? Sorry, Mark Kastick just, well, we'll come back to that. That looks very interesting. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis came in second with 21%, while no other candidate polled above 1%. By the way, I predict, obviously there's a lot of time between now and then, so I could be wrong, but were I to make my own prediction here, I would say Trump will be the Republican nominee in 2024, and Ron DeSantis will be his running mate, which makes sense for all kinds of reasons. Let's see. The showing marked a jump from the 55% support he enjoyed in the same type of straw poll at CPAC Orlando in late February. So he's actually gone up in this poll. Trump said during a speech at the conference shortly after the results were announced, quote, "I want to personally thank each and every one of you for your incredible support," unquote. The result was particularly promising for Trump after a straw poll at the Western Conservative Summit in Denver last month showed DeSantis with a slight edge. Last weekend's survey was in line with several other public polls showing Trump with substantial sway among GOP voters. The former president has forecast that he will use his influence to play the role of Republican kingmaker, doling out endorsements for candidates and campaigning across the country heading into the 2022 midterms, including, in some instances, against incumbent Republicans he views as insufficiently loyal to him and his agenda. So there you go. So that's the takeaways from CPAC. What the heck did Mark post in here? Well, here, we'll get to that. A couple comments in the Facebook live chat. Tom Blanchard says, what does it matter what party? Why can't it be about the best person for the job? Well, that would be a nice thing. And Tom said, Sleepy Joe is a professional politician. Oh, absolutely. So Mark posted something, but it's only showing up on one screen. I can't click the link. It says Candace Owens uses asthma as an example of the fear porn propaganda surrounding COVID-19. Oh, okay. Yeah, Candace Owens, we're almost out of time. I will say this. I've been very skeptical. I'm very skeptical of Candace Owens, and I'll tell you why just quickly. I've told this story on the show before, but just briefly, more of an anecdote, really. A number of years ago, I saw Candace Owens on Dave Rubin's show when I actually used to pay attention to Dave Rubin, who I also no longer can take seriously. But Candace Owens, and at the time, I think she was still going by or maybe she had just recently ditched her original moniker in the media was Red Pill Black, because she had supposedly, there's this thing about, you take the red pill and she's black. So she was Red Pill Black. And then eventually she started using her actual real name, Candace Owens. But I saw her being interviewed on Dave Rubin's show, and it was about her transformation from a liberal to a conservative. And look, people's politics can change over time. I actually think that's a healthy thing, no matter what direction you go in. You should not, well, let me put it this way. If you believe all the exact same things politically that you did 10 years ago or 20 years ago or even only 5 years ago, you're probably not thinking much. You're just locked into an ideology, and you're only paying attention to very specific and limited news outlets, and you're not allowing any independent thought in. So when I see someone whose views have evolved over time, who have changed over time, I think that's a good thing. I think it's healthy. But unless, of course, I think that they might be doing it as a business opportunity and they're not necessarily sincere. Here's why I'm suspicious about Candace Owens, a very specific reason. So I saw her on Dave Rubin, and you could take the interview that they had and really kind of divide it into two parts, because there's a moment where it's like somebody flipped a switch. The first part of the interview, she's telling her story about how she was a liberal, but she, on social media, she expressed a view that some fellow liberals didn't quite like, didn't think was liberal enough. She started getting attacked by people she thought were her allies, and she was a bit dismayed by it and began to see some of her fellow liberals as being really intolerant of thought, of, outside independent thought. And it really bummed her out, and to the point that it started to drive her away from liberalism. Now, the story that she tells, I believe, or I did at the time, I believed that story because I can see that happening, because I've seen other examples of that happening to people. So the story she tells about how she was driven away from liberalism, I can see how that would happen. Totally plausible. Everything about it made sense. But then the conversation that she's having with Dave Rubin shifts from her story and her history and what precipitated her change in ideology. They switched to a policy discussion. And as soon as they switched to talking about policy, her stance on issues and whatnot, like I said, it's like somebody flipped a switch, and all of a sudden she's the female Sean Hannity sitting there, and she just, any issue Dave Rubin would bring up, she's like 100% on board with conservatives and thinks liberals are absolutely completely wrong about everything. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, and it was very much, and she was speaking entirely in talking points. So there didn't seem to be any thought there. It was purely just one talking point after another. It was like she had listened to, a month of Sean Hannity, because Sean Hannity only speaks in talking points. That guy, I don't think, has ever had an independent thought in his head in his life. So it was like she just, she had listened to a month of Sean Hannity to prepare, and now she was just rattling off these talking points. And that made me very suspicious of her. Is she sincere in any of this, or did she really just over a short span of time, did she really just suddenly go from being a total liberal to a total conservative on every issue? That makes me suspicious. And Dirk Don in the chat says, Candace Owens is a total grifter. I agree. I believe it is a grift as well. Well, we are out of time, my friends. I want to thank you all for joining me today. Don't forget, we will be this Wednesday, our first live remote on this program. We will be live from the Hop Knot, or as a certain caller from New York calls it, the Hobnobbin. But it's actually the Hop Knot in the Brady Sullivan at 1000 Elm Street, right across the street. So we look forward to that. Thank you all who joined me today. Lots of great calls. I appreciate and love all of you. If you missed any part of today's show, it'll be up in just a little bit at WMNHradio.org and my website, mattconnarton.com. Don't forget, tomorrow on the show, I will be joined in the second hour by Mike Sudderth for our Tweakonomics segment. And Mike is coming in to discuss inflation, which has been rising quite much. So it's a very important issue. All right, that's going to do it for us for now. I will talk at y'all a little bit later. Bye, everybody.